If it means defeating the Lion and saving Gotham City from the courage that kills, Bruce Wayne will be willing to use himself as a guinea pig in the pages of Detective Comics number 1106. Meanwhile, over at Marvel, Iron Man must scour the globe, find Madame Mask, rescue kidnapped geniuses, and assuage his guilt, all in Iron Man issue number 2. But that's not all, because we also have the new history of the DC Universe, the Dakota Incident, issue number 1. Whatever became of Static and the rest of the Milestone heroes? Well, let's all find out together, shall we, as we hop into 3 of the absolute biggest comic books hitting shelves this week and find out together. So then, picking up directly where we left off in Detective Comics, the Lion was in the middle of doing his whole Ozymandias villainous monologue about how he doesn't need to complete his plan, because he already completed his plan when Batman wasn't looking, dousing the citizens of Gotham with a non-contagious version of his courage poison. And oh man, to this guy's credit, he makes an absolute meal of this speech. "Don't you see, Dark Knight, what I have done? I have freed people from the chains of fear all over the city now. People are quitting jobs they hate, being honest with their family, asking their lovers to marry them. I've transformed this place and its people for the better. They no longer need to live in fear. Even now, an armed group of citizenry is about to raid the GCPD headquarters and finally drag that corrupt villain Vandal Savage out into the street to make sure that he answers for all of his crimes." Now, I know what you're thinking. On paper, it's like, hell yeah, dog, about time, but as Batman is quick to remind the Lion and the reader, courage, especially reckless courage, works both ways. Yes, fear is a prison that keeps us from flying free and realizing our full potential, but at the same time, fear is also there to protect you and make sure you don't do something crazy you'll regret later. Gotham citizenry, even Jim Gordon, are flying high on courage right now and are looking to take it to people like Vandal Savage, but if you'll recall, Vandal Savage and his jackbooted cops have no problem breaking the law and hurting people under the best of scenarios. Now they're fearless too, and there's nothing stopping them from opening fire on the people in Gotham City, leading to untold amounts of death in the next couple hours if Batman can't do something. And oh, do something Batman most certainly does, and I must admit I did not see this coming, and it is clever as it is insane. You see, in order to counteract the courage poison that is currently surging through his veins, Batman decides that he is going to give himself a chemical speedball by also injecting himself with full-strength Scarecrow poison. God, I tell you the things I have to do just to get to normal, am I right? Batman ends up going on one hell of a drug-induced trip wherein he balances fear and courage all simultaneously. The Lion in his vision ends up becoming a literal Lion Man, as him and the Dark Knight duke it out in the streets with the fate of Gotham City hanging in the balance. Batman admits that Wildcat did teach the Lion to fight pretty good. Here's the problem, though. Leo Kingsford is like one of those guys who min-maxes in a video game. He spent too much time and put too many points into one thing. He is only a master of one type of combat. Well, Batman traveled the world and made sure that he was a master of multiple disciplines, and hey, when the chips are down, there's nothing stopping Batman from cheating either, like just calling the Batmobile to run the Lion over. Ah yes, I see he is a black belt in car fu as well. With the Lion briefly incapacitated, Batman has the opportunity to conference call with Mr. Terrific about their next course of action. If Batman was able to survive the infusion of fear toxin and get back to normal long enough to save the day, then it certainly means that the rest of the citizenry in Gotham will end up the same way. Yes, that's right, everyone. Batman's big plan to save Gotham City from eating itself is to douse them all with fear toxin dropped from crop dusting planes, and somewhere out there, you know, Scarecrow is absolutely kicking himself, going, "Ah, damn it, a bunch of crop dusting planes. Why didn't I think of that?" It's not a cure or anything, but it will keep everyone alive long enough for Mr. Terrific and the other eggheads to finally hammer out a cure. Batman takes over the airwaves and tells everyone to disperse, which is exactly what they do. And I mean, if you weren't already tripping on fear gas, I'm sure seeing Batman, especially this version of Batman, yelling at you on the big screen would be more than enough to make me want to go home as well. Now, during all the chaos, the Lion managed to sneak away, and you won't believe where he actually ended up showing up, outside the gates of Pennyworth Manor. It seems that at his absolute lowest, with nothing nothing left to lose, what the Lion really wanted to do was to see his hero Bruce Wayne one more time. This turn of events actually ends up throwing Batman for a major loop. He knew this guy was lost, he knew he was deluded, but he didn't know how lost and deluded. For a split second there, Batman even briefly considers taking off his helmet and revealing to the Lion that the man he so hates and the man that he so worships are actually one in the same, and that his whole personal quest to defeat his own inner fear and by extension rescue Gotham from fear was something of a fool's errand. Though in the end he thinks better of it and opts to take the Lion in the old-fashioned way. Of course, this does beg the question, why did the Lion come to see Bruce assuming that everyone in the city would be racked with courage poison? And you know what? The answer might surprise you. It certainly did me. Remember, the Lion is a huge Bruce Wayne fanboy, and because of that, he wanted his idol spared of the courage poison, that special bottle of scotch that Leo had sent Bruce a couple issues back. Well, as it turns out, it actually always had the cure inside it, and now that Batman has it, Mr. Terrific and the others can start mass producing it. Starting with that poor kid from the boat, he's made a physical recovery, yes, but mentally the trauma is going to be sticking with him for a long time, and considering that this whole story began with a young boy being horribly traumatized by one of Gotham's famous legends, the whole thing does end up taking on a whole bittersweet undercurrent, like, hey, give it 10 years and is this kid going to be another villain made possible by a grant from the Wayne Foundation? Which, geez, you know, juxtapose this with the end of the Asima arc, and how that talked about the recidivism of young male offenders in Gotham City, and man, I think Tom Taylor really is creating an overarching theme for his entire detective run. And you know what? The similarities between this kid himself and the Lion aren't lost on Batman either. As the comic comes to a close, Bruce actually visits Leo in prison. He doesn't judge him or lecture to him at all, he just lets him talk and he listens. Two broken boys that Gotham turned into something much else. Now from that admittedly downer ending to something a little bit more high-flying, we have Iron Man issue number 2. Tony has himself a little flashback to one of his earliest run-ins with Madame Mask. He remembers how she attempted to steal a suit of his armor, he gave chase to her, and before you know it, they were in bed together, as was the style at the time, you see. Of course, being a superhero and supervillain, their pillow talk was anything but normal. Mask asked Tony if he feared anything, and instead of saying, oh, I don't know, the whiskey bottle, instead he fears that he might run into someone who is just like him, another Tony Stark, someone who in a moment of great desperation pushed beyond the bounds of regular humanity and created the keys to their own salvation. No, Tony's not being petty right here. He doesn't fear someone being smarter than him or even being a better Iron Man than him. He fears that someone, if given the opportunity, would use their big brains not to be a hero, but to be a villain. Yes, that's right. It seems that Tony actually gave Madame Mask the plan that she is using against him right in the here and now, though interestingly enough, Tony says that he feared this outcome so much, he actually created a contingency plan. What could that be? Now, in the present, Iron Man and Captain America are duking it out with a group of Dread Knights who are causing trouble at the Latverian embassy. Tony needs Steve's help in tracking down AIM's safe houses if he ever hopes to rescue Adam Ware, one of the many young geniuses that Madame Mask and AIM kidnapped in hopes of trying to create a brand new Tony Stark. Though ever the multitasker, Iron Man manages to have this conversation with Captain America, fight the villains, and take a very flirty phone call from that caterer we met in the previous issue. She's an assertive type of woman who actually is asking Tony on a date. Steve is happy to help, but at the same time, him and the other Avengers are really starting to worry about Tony's well-being. He's been through so much in such a short amount of time, losing his company, gaining his company, getting married, getting divorced, etc., etc., and whenever Tony has too much on his plate, it usually causes him to act out and become everyone else's problem. In fact, after Iron Man flies away, Steve says to the other Avengers that they are going to need to keep their eye on him. What could that mean? Now back over with Adam Ware and the other kidnapped scientists, we see that they are being kept in an AIM facility looked over by none other than the Fixer. Great use of an old Thunderbolts character. This isn't any prison either, it's a state-of-the-art torture prison, made up of the finest Mysterio and arcade tech money can buy, as to best personalize the nightmare for all of these different prisoners, in hopes that the only way they can escape is by pushing through as Tony Stark did, and creating that next great Iron Man level armor invention that Madame Mask and AIM hopes to steal for themselves. Now after that, we check on in with Pepper Potts. It seems that she's doing her due diligence as a part of Tony's company, running interference, making sure that the news doesn't catch on to all of different nominees of the first annual Tony Stark Awards all being kidnapped around the same time. Lord knows they don't need to be fighting villains and fighting a massive lawsuit at the same time. Pepper attempts to confide in Melinda May about how much she's worried about Tony's well-being right now, and Melinda, once again proving why she is such an excellent addition to this series, shuts Pepper down completely, saying, "Look, I'm a bodyguard, I'm not your marriage counselor." Pepper's response is equally great too. "That's fine, we're not even together right now." Elsewhere, Tony transverses the globe looking for any information he can on where AIM is hiding, and while he manages to break up a few smaller cells, no one is talking right now, with no options left. Tony has no choice but to go directly into the Lion's Den, that hub of scum and villainy known as Madripoor, where he doesn't even bother hiding because, let's face it, Tony Stark sticks out like a sore thumb anywhere he goes. Iron Man asks around, and before long he ends up coming face to face with Grizzly, that famous cannibalistic supervillain, and his gang of fur vest wearing toughs. But of course it's not Grizzly Iron Man wants, he wants his boss, none other than MODOK, one of AIM's original leaders. MODOK is tight-lipped as ever. He actually doesn't know what Madam Mask and AIM are doing right now, especially after him and the group had a little falling out in the pages of New Venom. That's why MODOK is currently laying low in Madripoor right now, getting a whole Roman Emperor-style spa treatment, which is as hilarious as it is gross. Iron Man feels that he could probably beat the information out of MODOK, however, at that very moment, the place ends up getting assailed by AIM troopers. At first, Tony thinks that MODOK must have hit the silent alarm and that these guys are coming to help him, but actually quite the opposite. Madam Mask has sent these goons to take out her competition, meaning that the only way that Iron Man and MODOK are going to make it out of this situation is that if they can put their differences aside long enough to join forces. Now, after that, we finally come to the new history of the DC Universe, Dakota Incident, issue number 1, and oh man, let me tell you, this one is an absolute banger. As things begin, we are actually in the future, where we are introduced to a brand new hero by the name of Beacon, only he's not a new hero, he is actually an older version of Amistad Irvin, aka son to Rocket of Rocket and Icon fame. It seems that in this future, Beacon is the big hero of Dakota. In fact, he is actually being mentored by his Uncle Virgil, aka Static, who, as we learned via a phone call, actually has a family of his very own, while he is not actively helping Beacon. Currently, Beacon is fighting one of Static's old foes, Shiv, who I must say aged very gracefully. Beacon makes short work of Shiv, but unfortunately before the young man has a chance to celebrate, everything around him starts going completely haywire. Beacon's world, his entire future, ends up melting away as he himself is thrown into the greater DC time stream, wherein he himself ends up becoming unwilling narrator as the issue attempts to answer the question, what the hell happened to the Milestone heroes and why don't we see them anymore in the main DC continuity? For that, we are taken to what is referred to as the Golden Age of Dakota City. You see, unlike Gotham or Metropolis, this city didn't have heroes. It was watched over by their billionaire CEO, humanitarian benefactor Edwin Alva of Alva Industries, which of course you would know all about if you read the old Milestone or even if you just watched the Static cartoon show. Alva's right hand was a fellow by the name of Curtis Metcalf, which of course you will know as the man who will one day become Hardware. Together, the two men worked together on building wonders, and their newest project involved them trying to solve the Paris Island problem, the only place in the city that still managed to be ravaged by crime. In order to bring peace to the streets, this giant tech company decided to arm the local PD with state-of-the-art tear gas that just so happened to be laced with a radioactive isotope that would mark the criminal gangs for arrest later. And oh man, let me tell you, original Milestone sure was way ahead of the curve when it came to big tech getting into bed with the cops, am I right? From there, I think you all know what happened next. The cops turned the gas on the criminals, but also a bunch of protesters who were out in the streets attempting to get their voices heard as it related to police violence. This is actually a nice little fusion of the original Milestone Birth of the Bang Baby story, but also some of the newer stuff we saw in Milestone 2.0. Again, I appreciate this idea that it doesn't matter if you're a gangbanger, a young activist, or just someone who happened to be walking by at the time. If you're a black person in America, you're never far away from police violence. Hell, if anything, this hits just as hard, if not harder nowadays, when all I need to do is turn on social media to see the cops gassing people in communities all over the country. history. Of course, that radioactive isotope came with some crazy side effects. A bunch of the people who were affected ended up getting changed at the quantum level, developing superpowers. The first of these new bang babies, as they would be called, would be the members of the Blood Syndicate. They weren't heroes, mind you, but them gaining powers when they did most certainly shifted the balance in Dakota like never before. After that, they were followed by people like Static, Virgil Hawkins, who took to the streets to become a hero, and in doing so, ended up becoming the all-important spark that would inspire others, like Beacon's mother, who would eventually end up meeting Icon, aka Augustus Freeman, and talking him into becoming a superhero. Then, of course, we have Hardware himself. Once everything ended up going tits up with the gas, you better believe that Edwin Alva cut his right-hand man loose and blamed him for everything that went wrong. Meaning that he had no choice but to go underground, take up a brand new superhero moniker, and attempt to fight back against his old company any way he could. And believe it or not, for a while there, things were good in a bit that I think very much is meant to mirror actual Milestone comics at their height. The city not only had heroes, but heroes that spoke to them on a much deeper level than some of the others. But of course, every golden age eventually ends up coming to an end. And this Super Dakota Renaissance would sadly be no different, as Edwin Alva ended up getting mysteriously murdered, and they never do actually tell us who killed him either. Of course, Hardware ended up becoming the #1 suspect, which caused Curtis to dig even deeper into Alva's dirty dealings to discover that he had actually been in bed with several different governments and military powers. As part of a conspiracy referred to as the Superman Project, it seems that the powers that be were looking to try and create a new generation of super soldiers, and Alva himself was looking to get in nice and early, making himself and his city a major focal point in what was to come. Now, did I also mention that because this is a period piece, the president at this time just so happens to be none other than Lex freaking Luthor? Naturally, President Luthor refuses to lose control of this metahuman situation, and because of that, he allows Amanda Waller to dispatch the Suicide Squad to kowtow all the super-powered individuals by any means necessary. Yes, I believe in Washington they call this the old Fred Hampton special. Also, little off topic, but I love this incarnation of the Suicide Squad, including Bronze Tiger, a guy who has always walked the line between hero and villain and who finds his own conscience tied into absolute naught as teammates like Captain Boomerang make very racist comments. Finally getting to clean up the hood proper like, mate. Naturally, the defenders of Dakota aren't going to take this sort of incursion lying down. The Suicide Squad barely touches down in Paris Island for more than a few minutes when they end up coming face to face with the full force of the Blood Syndicate, which is in and of itself just a super awesome matchup. Hey, we're the Suicide Squad, we're villains who occasionally do good while working for an evil government. Hey, we're the Blood Syndicate, we're gang members with superpowers who try our hardest to survive, fight rival gangs, and occasionally also do good. It's made abundantly clear that Task Force X bit off way more than they could chew in this situation, as Hardware and Static end up pushing them back. Not wanting to be embarrassed in this operation, Luthor and Waller end up calling in the entire military, who start shooting with little regard for who they hit, enemy or civilian, it doesn't matter to them. Oh geez, an anonymous, heavily armed governmental force shooting up an American city with no regard must be a comic book fantasy, right? Because I mean, it's not like things are going, you know what, look, I always make that joke, but I can't even do it this time. Shit's fucked up. What's not fucked up though is actually getting to see Captain Atom, who at this point in history was the lapdog of President Luthor, go full force against Icon. These guys clash so hard they end up creating a massive shockwave, but that's nothing compared to the barbs they end up trading between one another. By the authority of the United States government, you will all stand down. I've walked this earth for centuries, seen men like you wield your so-called authority time and time again. You have no such authority here. The fight is as devastating as it is close, but the tide ultimately turns in the good guys' direction when Bronze Tiger opts to take a stand against the Suicide Squad, just as the Trinity, Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman make the scene. The fight may officially be over, but the worst is still yet to come. The city of Dakota has been absolutely decimated. And while the Milestone heroes could definitely continue fighting, they fear what might happen to the regular everyday civilians should they do just that. Waller and President Luthor want them in the worst way possible. And in this situation, maybe the only way to save lives and live up to their heroic ideal is to shake hands and bend the knee. President Luthor wants every one of the Milestone heroes to agree to give up being superheroes in a move that is actually very similar to how the government got the JSA to hang up their costumes. And in exchange, the city and its people will be spared. Again, it's not exactly the outcome anyone wanted, but unfortunately they have very few options. While the adults argue outside, Rocket and Static actually end up meeting none other than Jefferson Pierce, aka Black Lightning, who is of course very important to the history of DC Comics, as he is the first black man to have his own ongoing series there. He also just so happened to be working for the Luthor government around this time, because he was one of those people who thought that he could make incremental changes from the inside, but now he knows full well that that's bullshit, and because of it he wants to try and help the kids stick it to Luthor on their way out. They do this by destroying Alva's research, making full well sure that none of it will fall into Luthor's hands, which also explains why we don't have any new Bang babies in the future. Icon and Rocket come back into the room in just enough time to see Icon and Hardware shake hands with Luthor. Naturally, they're young and still filled with hope, meaning that they don't want to make this devil's deal, but once Luthor starts threatening Virgil's family, he has no choice. Commander Steel will stay behind in Dakota to make sure that everyone abides by the new accords, and they're even going to build a brand new office not far from Virgil's dad's community center. Ouch. And yeah, just like that, the golden age of Dakota heroes came to an end. They hung up their costumes, but many of them did not give up the fight, continuing to try and help their community in any ways they could. This, of course, explains why Beacon's future ended up falling away, and as we check back on in with him, he manages to escape the time stream and land right in front of a much older, college-aged Virgil Hawkins. Which, as you may or may not remember from that Kids Are All Fight DCKO tie-in, he hasn't actually worn the Static costume in years. However, it was this chance meeting with Beacon that lit the fire in his stomach once again, that he can still be the spark, that he can still inspire people, and that Beacon's future may still very well come to pass. All it needs is for another spark to be lit, and for Virgil to don his costume and be a superhero once again. And so there you have it, everybody. 3 more must-read books that you could check out this week. First up, we have Detective Comics, and overall, I definitely enjoyed this finale. I'm actually kind of surprised just how much grace Tom Taylor gave his new villain, the Lion, and it does make a certain amount of sense. Him and Batman started in very similar places. They both had similar end goals: to conquer their own fear, and by extension, help the rest of their beloved city do the very same. The only difference is that the Lion went a little too far, did it via murderous means, while Batman tries to do that by actively inspiring people. And it is kind of funny at the end that Batman had the opportunity to completely blow this guy's mind and blow his entire perception by revealing that he and Bruce Wayne are the same person, but he didn't do it because I think weirdly Batman has a soft spot for Leo Kingsford, and I have to wonder, will we see this character again, and maybe, just maybe, could a redemption arc be in this guy's future again? It seems like Taylor liked this guy a lot. Overall, I thought it was a great new villain, made for a fun adventure, really cool stuff all the way down. I would give it a well-deserved 8 out of 10. After that, we have Iron Man issue number 2, and while I certainly did enjoy this issue, it was a little bit more downbeat than issue 1, a little less showy. Again, what's right about this series continues to be right, and that is the extra focus that Williamson is really giving to Tony Stark as a person, as a man, as a character, his relationships, not just with the villains he's fighting, but also all the different women in his life, and even Captain America. They continue to tease that maybe the Avengers don't trust Tony, that maybe there's something else going on here. I'll be interested to see what that mystery becomes later on. It's, a nice, fun little time. And beyond that, I don't really have much more to say on this one. They're building up to it. There definitely looks to be some fun stuff in the future, like getting to see Iron Man join forces with MODOK to fight AIM. That should be good. Overall, I would give this one a very workman 7 out of 10. And last but certainly not least, this week we have the much-touted, much-awaited Dakota Incident, the issue that hoped to explain to many fans, myself included, hey, why isn't DC using Milestone right now? Where are all the Milestone characters? What's happening? And the answer is, yeah, pretty good, I would say. Fairly strong issue. You can definitely feel the love behind this one. They got a killer's row of amazing creators, some of who had worked on the original Milestone, some who had worked on, I guess, the newer Milestone 2.0 stuff from not that long ago, and you can definitely tell that they wanted to deliver their best work, and I think they did. This one, sets up a very interesting status quo with Beacon and this lost future, and characters like Virgil coming out of retirement and maybe inspiring more more heroes to follow suit and do the same thing. This could potentially lead to some really interesting stories down the line, assuming that DC and their parent company Warner Brothers wants to do that. And I don't know if they actually do. Again, I'm not a conspiracy-minded person, but some people out there have been saying some stuff. I've had my ear to the pavement, and I dare say they're actually making a lot of sense. In case you didn't know, they made a whole big song and dance about Static potentially being on one of the brand new Titans teams, but we got the solicitations for the two brand new Titans books. He's not on either. Seemingly, him showing up in that DCKO tie-in from a couple weeks ago was only to promote this issue. An issue that, surprisingly enough, also leaked out a week before it was supposed to, and that, never ever happens before. And again, if you are a conspiratorially minded person, you would not be, remiss for thinking, hey, did DC leak that on purpose so the sales would tank so they wouldn't be asked to follow up on this because they never planned to follow up on it anyway? I don't know, man. I don't know. I can't answer. I don't work for the company. I don't know for sure. We might never know for sure. What I do know is the fans did show up in droves to support this, and they really are getting behind it. And when I checked, I think it is currently #1 on Amazon, and well-deserved for it. Hopefully, this actually causes the powers that be to, fill the void that Milestone has left in a lot of comic readers' hearts. Hopefully, they will give them stories that are actually in continuity in the main universe that they can possibly follow up on. Again, I don't know if they will. I don't know if this is just a February thing. It certainly feels that, DC and Warner Brothers, their parent company, and I guess now also Paramount Skydance, who are going to be owning them soon enough, it certainly feels like their minds are elsewhere, and it gets even, a little grosser when we stop and think that, hey, they announced 13 brand new titles for DC Next Level, and not a single one of them had a single black lead, which doesn't feel good. Thankfully, this one issue feels really good, though. I would give it a very strong 9 out of 10. Check this out. Even if you're not a Milestone fan, I think you will find a lot to enjoy in this one. I wish only that I could have actually covered this one during Black History Month. I know I'm covering this on Sunday, so I'm a little late, but you know what? That's fine, because there is no wrong time to celebrate black art, black creatives, and black excellence. Every time is a good time, and I hope DC learns that at some point. And until next time, everyone, this has been Cape Joel. Hope you read some great books this week, and I will be back again to do it all again next week. Bye-bye, everyone.